Welcome to Body Buddies, home of the Power Foods lifestyle. Take it one meal, one workout, one day at a time. And now, here's the founder of Body Buddies, Kristy Jo.
Welcome back to another episode of the Body Buddies podcast. This is episode number 172. It's okay to have an eating disorder. Man, oh man, this title may confuse you and make you go, what is she doing? And I'm just going to say, you've got to listen. I need you. If you are in a disordered eating mindset, if somebody has told you they're worried about you, if you know somebody who you are worried about, I need you to listen to this entire podcast. It's actually an interview. This was with Allison Donaghy of Domino Thinking, and I was very honored to be her guest, and she's told me I can go ahead and rebroadcast this on my podcast. There are so many of you out there, both female and male, that need to hear that you're not broken, that you're not in a shameful place. And even though other people are not wise enough or they just don't have the experience to be able to talk to you on the level I'm going to, I need you to know there's nothing wrong with you. Now, do I want you to stay where you're at in perhaps some less than healthy approaches? No. But number one thing I need you to know, it's okay to want to improve your body. Absolutely. And I am here to help be a guide, to help you to avoid some of the mistakes that can cause greater problems to your body. But I will absolutely be happy to guide you to an improved body. Before I play this for you, I want to share actually a quick little interview that I did with one of my dance students. I currently am teaching in a studio, and we're going to keep her anonymous, but just last week she came up to me and she, nearly in tears, said, Kristy, I need to just thank you. I said, what? For what? What are you talking about? And she's like, if you wouldn't have come here and been a part of this studio, I really don't know where I'd be right now. When I first met this young woman, I think she's about 13, she was eating very, very, very little. So I just want to play this for you and help you open your mind into some of the shifts in mindset that are possible. And here's the thing is, it can happen to you very young, very old, in the middle somewhere. And guess what, guys? Like, it's okay. I just want you to know that. And with my background, and hopefully you've heard more of my episodes about my story, but if not, I invite you to listen to this first. And then if it resonates with you, please join me on this journey. I have more for you to learn. I have so much more than you'll ever imagine in showing you there are answers, and I am not holding anything back. But you have to step up to the table. So enjoy this quick little conversation I had with my young, very beautiful dancer. So wait, we first met like 10 months ago, and you did not like to eat food then?
No.
Why?
I felt as if like if I was to eat, then I'd be in a way gaining weight, but at the same time I knew that I wasn't gaining weight. So it was like a magnet pulling me from doing what's right to what my mind really wants. I felt that I know that sugars like don't help or anything. Like sugars actually put fat in your body, but I knew that, but I felt as if I ate the sugars, then it's easier to burn off because it's sugar, and so I thought that I'd be able to burn it off easier.
Yeah. So you weren't eating very many calories, and I remember we would like talk about what you'd eat in and talk about like what you wanted to achieve, but like what's made a difference? I mean, it's 10 months later. What kind of principles do you think about now when you eat?
I always try to think about like fruits or vegetables and like how much protein I put into my body. I want to be able to gain the muscle that I need to keep going with dance instead of losing the weight or like the supposed weight that I want to be losing. Yeah,
it's good. And I mean, you look great, and that's the hard thing, because in dance, you want to look good. We sit there and stare in the mirror, right? And so it's hard sometimes, and you compare yourself to other people, but when you know that there's a better way, like a healthy way, that you can look good, you don't need to restrict. It's more like, no, put the right things in your body, right?
And see, that was really hard for me because my mother had always had access to candy, and so did I, because she owned or managed a candy shop. So I always was sugar or anything unhealthy. I hated anything other than just the most unhealthy products I would always consume. Even when I was stressed or super anxious or whatever, I would actually not eat. I would starve because I was afraid to eat because I thought that I'd end up being sick because of my situation.
Interesting. It's always an ongoing learning, and what I've learned is you never stop learning because your life changes and situations change and, things change. But the more you learn, the more you have the knowledge to make good decisions and not hurt your body. And that's one thing I always tell you girls, like, if you haven't eaten all day, you look like garbage on the floor. Like, I can tell when you don't have energy. I can tell when you've eaten garbage food. You don't feel good. You don't enjoy dancing, and that's not the way to become a better dancer. So focus on what we do. I sure love when you guys eat your veggies.
It's time to think opposite. Suspend your belief, consider another perspective, and proceed with clarity. Coming to you live from the west coast of Canada, it's live and it's edgy. Now here's your host, Allison Donaghy.
Hi, and thanks for tuning in to Think Opposite. I am your host, Allison, owner of Domino Thinking. I am a cause and effect strategist, and it is my mission to empower and activate people to consider different perspectives to better their lives, businesses, and the planet, because I believe an unexamined perspective is a deadly virus. You can find out more on my website, dominothinking.com, and you can find me on social media. Everything you do has a consequence, and have you considered the consequences of your choices? Have you explored where your beliefs come from? I bring guests on my show who may challenge what you believe and provide an opportunity to look at things differently. It doesn't mean you're going to change your mind, and that's totally okay. But there's something powerful that happens when you listen to another perspective. And I mean really listen with open ears and open hearts, with the information or with the intention to understand another point of view. Today, my guest is Kristy Jo Hunt, a fitness nutrition specialist, a certified personal trainer, a nationally ranked natural figure competitor, and author of The Power Foods Lifestyle. And she thinks it's okay if people have an eating disorder, worry obsessively about their bodies, food, and fitness, etc. So I'm super interested to hear that perspective. It's not one you come across every day. Yeah, I think it is just so important that we entertain the opposite of what we typically think about. Yeah. Because until we do that, we don't gain any certainty about what we actually think. We walk around an awful lot being so certain we're right, but we don't spend time actually being certain about the details that we're right about. And until we consider a different perspective, we really don't have that certainty. We're just lying to ourselves.
It's so true. Yep. And it's a beautiful world when we open that up.
It is. It is. I meet the most interesting people, have the most interesting conversations with this whole, opposite approach. So I love it. I love that you're here. And okay, so this is pretty different because most people say it's not okay to have an eating disorder.
Right.
You have to go to the hospital. You need psychiatric help. You need to eat a sandwich. There's all of this stuff. So how did you get to this place first? So let's back up, and because I'm sure you didn't come out of the womb thinking, hey, let's just support people in their eating disorders. So
absolutely.
How did that come about for you?
Well, at the age of 9, I started to be hyper aware of my body. I really believe that for a great number of people, it's intrinsic. I believe there are external factors, things like, are you engaged in a sport or a hobby that shows your body? That's what a lot of people assumed when they hear me tell my story about the disorders that I dealt with growing up, because I'm very heavily engaged in the dance world. So, of course, they put A plus B equals C. No, not true. I think there's a lot more to be said for an A-type personality, somebody who has very high expectations of themselves, somebody who tends to think that they can achieve more than other people. There's a little bit of narcissism. There's a little bit of superiority, though most won't admit that. I will, having explored it myself and coached so many others through it. So I'll just be very blunt, and I think this is the show to be blunt on.
Absolutely. So, I like it a lot.
So yeah, you've got a little bit of narcissism going on, and you've got these expectations of yourself. So this hyper awareness of my body came from just looking around at the other girls, noticing that perhaps my thighs were a little bit thicker when you're sitting in the car and you're wearing shorts, and the weight of your leg against the seat, it makes it bulge out. And I noticed that my bulge was bigger than most of the other girls. And I thought, that's weird. That's not right. And so it just
skinny's better.
Yeah, you gotta be skinny and bony. And I was always on the bottom of all our little stunt groups. Like, why could I never be on the top?
Don't they know what a princess you were and you belong on that top of that mountain?
That was all I wanted in life. I had to base everyone else. And mind you, I was a very healthy, and that's a word I think we're going to explore. That's all subjective. What is healthy anyways, right? So, but I would say I was a relatively average body fat. I looked great. I look at my childhood photos and I'm like, you're a beautiful little girl, but as I got older and started recognizing that my friends would say things like, oh, if you eat that, you'll get fat, or, the little things in the lunch line, or started noticing the fitness magazines at the grocery store when we were going to check out and noticing like my body does not look like that. There's something wrong with me.
Yeah,
and
airbrushed.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and then starting, I've always been a book nerd. I read books like they're going out of style. And so at a very young age, I'd go to our county library and I would check out books on how to diet and how to, especially for dancers, which really, quite frankly, taught you how to be an anorexic. And so that was kind of the framework that I started growing up in, enter the late teenage years, where I could not control because I was pushing harder. I had higher expectations now because now I'm in high school and I'm dating and boys are on the scene, and am I good enough? And so then the restriction became more intense. Therefore, I couldn't sustain it. I didn't necessarily have that full switch over mentally where I could sustain it. And that certainly does happen for a great number of people in the anorexia department of eating disorders. So I would swing to the other extreme, which is where many people also lie, which is binge eating. And my binges became more and more severe, and I got in the habit of deeper purges, whether it was through throwing up or through running in the middle of the night. I'd go run 5, 8, 10 miles to burn it off. You're going to buy things to replace what you ate in the cupboard and the pantry. You don't want other people to see. And it became extremely severe to the point where I look back on my journals and there's not a single journal entry going back. I've journaled since I was 5 years old. There's not a single journal entry where I didn't put the number of calories I ate, whether I could be happy and love myself or whether I hated myself and needed to do better the next day. That was the point of my existence during all those years. That was the first thing on my mind in the morning and the last thing on my mind when I went to sleep. How many calories have I eaten? Am I good enough today? That was my worth.
Oh, it's heartbreaking to hear that. Oh. Because I know it's not like you're alone in that. Like it's, sure. I had a sister when we grew up, and she was very aware of her body, probably more so than the rest of us. Mm-hmm. And the crazy things that she would do, like she would believe that toast was less fattening than bread.
Right.
Right.
It is interesting. You create all sorts of things.
Yeah, and it always just seemed so bizarre to us the way that she did it. But then, my same sisters used to tell me how fat I was as a kid. And so I have memories of myself being like this really fat kid. But when I look at photos, I was skinny.
Oh, interesting.
And it's interesting how that shapes the way that we see ourselves. Like I still have no idea what I look like.
Sure. Well, do you know how many people have asked me, they're like, is body dysmorphia a real thing? They think they're the only ones dealing with it. And I tell them, I'm like, do you realize that I'd be amazed if you didn't have body dysmorphia? Because we are not victims. We're people who are susceptible to the talk and the feelings and the sharing of ideas from other people. That's how really we are programmed. We're susceptible to incorporating those into our beliefs of ourselves, how we view ourselves. And so everything is relative. And that's why even defining healthy versus unhealthy or skinny or not skinny is completely dependent upon what your upbringing or your programming is, which brings us into a deeper discussion of even, well, then who's even, to define truly what an eating disorder is, because here's the real challenge. This is the mind blow right here. And I'm going to go into eating disorder mind, not my trained, very mature speak. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
And this is where a lot of people with some, whether they feel more comfortable saying disordered eating habits or eating disorders, because it feels more labelish, like, oh my gosh, I have this, like I have a sickness. No, you're not sick. Like you're dealing with some tendencies. Is that person would say to somebody who's like, okay, you really need help. You're not healthy. This isn't healthy. We're going to look at people like that, and we're going to see a fat person who's telling us to eat like them so we can look like them. That's all we're going to hear and see. And in our mind, there's no freaking way. And so you're going to do whatever you've been conditioned to or conditioned yourself to, whether it was the girl in the 4th grade who told you that you really should not eat any of those things. They're bad for you. Therefore, that's your new belief, and you will do everything in your power. The way our mothers or our fathers interacted with food will absolutely tie into what approaches we use if it gets to that point. And then also what information we seek out. Like I mentioned, the books I read or those fitness magazines. All of those things are going to create what we turn to. And it doesn't matter who out there, whether it's a therapist, a dietitian, a loving parent, a teacher, a concerned friend, it doesn't matter who you are. If I'm in that state of mind, I'm going to look at you and be like, and who the heck are you to tell me that I need to look like you? Shut your mouth. I'm going to do things my way, because that's the worst thing. When you're seeking relevance and status and control within yourself, that's the last thing you want to hear is to be healthy like somebody else.
Right. Yeah. Because you're not somebody else.
Yeah.
Well, and is there not this attachment to that label of the eating disorder that
absolutely
is, and not just that label, it's like, or a label, any label. Like we put ourselves into these boxes, and then we become so attached to being in that box that we don't actually ever want to leave it because it's warm and cozy in that box.
That's so true. And especially during a time of life, whether, most eating disorders are going to start, initial onset will be in the teenage years or early 20s, though that does not mean there are not exceptions out there happening all the time. I talk to women in their 70s who still have eating disorders. So, but I'm talking onset when we're really susceptible. Our framework of how we view our lives and our maturity of perspective has not been fully developed yet.
Right.
And so, when we don't necessarily have a definition of who we are yet, we're going to cling to any status or belonging, even if that is an eating disorder, because if you have a status or a label, you belong somewhere. You're relevant.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's that whole victim part too, right? Like, it's not my fault. I have a disorder.
Right.
And I no longer have to be responsible for the fact that I have this disorder because, it's a disorder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And whether it's, truly a chemical shift in the mind that, had a traumatic entry point. We know that a lot of times, I'd say in the clients I work with, 70% of the time, there's sexual trauma in their past. And so it's a means of seeking to find some form of control. And there's some deep punishment as well for being a victim of that. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's a very complex thing. And for all our listeners, like, there's certainly, I have to always say, there is no one way definition. That's what I love about your show, Allison, is it's an exploration. We're not saying like, oh my gosh, this is the way, because I realize there are demographics and exceptions all across the board.
Well, and as soon as we sort of have some information, new information comes along. And as a responsible person in the world and somebody who holds beliefs and want to talk about their beliefs, we have to keep adjusting. We have to keep looking and assessing the new information as it comes in and goes, oh, yeah, okay, that fits, that doesn't fit. So it is such an ongoing discussion and process.
Yes, I love that.
So do you think that if you have this image of yourself early on and it's been reinforced by your family or schools and media and all of that stuff, do you ever really think you can get past it? Like, I think you can get these coping strategies, but do you ever really think it's 100% behind you?
No. Nope. And I have these talks with, my clients of years and those who've gone through my Binge Bye Bye course and things like that. And I think it's the same for any addiction. We're human beings. We're experiencing all sorts of energy shifts and changes and seasons in life. And what initially is a coping mechanism can be a coping mechanism the rest of our lives. And in terms of, yes, I'm saying eating disorders are a coping mechanism. It's a way of dealing with life. Mm-hmm. And so though we can put them at bay, we can use proper strategies once we've learned, yes, you can achieve that dream body you so desire, but doing so using science and strategy instead of, restriction and forcibly, executing and getting rid of any of those calories that were unwanted. Once we get to that point, we start to see there is a better outcome ahead. We start to see that there's a potential for us to always hear the voice, and I call them echoes. We will always hear echoes, and we have the maturity and the ongoing conversation with other like-minded people who have dealt with that to remind us and to assure us those echoes are not that you are not better or working on it or made progress. It's simply an echo, and you know what to do with your echoes. Right. And it's really beautiful ever since that just dawned on me, a few years ago. For me, even myself, I sit here and coach thousands of people. Are you kidding? And then I'm supposed to be like, I'm healed and everybody you can do it too. No, I'm going to say, no, I've moved past the immaturity. Okay. I have moved into strategy, knowledge, and rational processing. I love the way you say it, processing. And, and using that to move myself toward the direction that I have taken the time and education to define is healthy, balanced, and beautiful, which for my body does not look like other people's bodies. My expectation of my body is very high. And to me, that's my definition of beautiful. And that's what all of us have to do is define that for ourselves. Right.
Yeah. It's, and I think possibly what we become more satisfied in our body naturally changes. Mm-hmm. Oh, like sure. Probably the parts of my body that I was like hyper aware of when I was 15 is not the same as now. When we go through so many changes there that there's so much to cope with. And my need, I think, for external permission or approval is less than it used to be.
Yeah. So but it's still there, right?
It is. When when I watch a movie and I'll be like, oh, God, I could wear that outfit. Looks so cute on her. I wish I could wear something like that, right? And I have this great woman that, unfortunately, she closed her clothing store. But when I would go in there, she would say things to me, and I'd hear her saying it to other people as well. You're not the problem. The designer's the problem. They didn't make the clothes that fit you.
I like that.
I loved it every time I heard her say it to somebody, and she said it because she believed it. And it was just such a different experience for those women and for myself when getting to hear that, because the first place we go to is I'm the one that's flawed, not everything else around me.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, and that's a tricky statement too of flawed, because then again we have to challenge that a step further, saying, well, who defined not flawed? Whose definition? Who set up that committee and who's sitting on it? I'd like to talk to them.
I know, they didn't send me a memo.
Yeah, where's the memo? Where's the email? I did not sign that petition. But once we challenge that, we have to recognize that, my goodness, like most of the shoulds in our life come from somewhere deep within. Mm-hmm. They don't come from anyone else.
Yeah, and and I think they sneak in so. Like, I don't think it has to be these life-altering moments that sneak in. I think it can just be like some random weird thing that one person says and you hang on to that.
Oh, that's huge. One sentence. I could sit here and tell you like 10 different phrases I've held on to and had to release one by one through coaching, and hypnotherapy and all sorts of work that I've done on myself.
Right.
Yeah. And it makes you think, my goodness, what do I say to other people that they might hang on to for years? It's scary. Sometimes you can't go down that rabbit hole.
Well, and sometimes because it's just some random comment that was said by somebody, how do you even define it or find it in your past, your history of like a million gazillion things that have been said to you in your lifetime? Yeah. And one little thing has shaped the direction of where you're going.
Oh, that's so true.
Yeah.
So cognizant and aware. And I think that's a huge part of if anyone wanted to tell us we had an eating disorder, or if maybe we were listening to this and saying, my goodness, I do know that what I'm doing is not the best for me. We have our logical mind and we can recognize those things.
Yeah.
That awareness of saying, am I okay with this? That's step number one, right? Am I okay with these thoughts I'm having or these actions? If I'm okay with it, well, doggone it, then I accept the consequences. If that means that I'm going to be, up to how many people, I believe the mortality rate is 10% of all people who experience anorexia nervosa end up, it's a morbidity rate. And 1 in 5 of those is a suicide.
Wow.
And so, I mean, those are going to be consequences. But at the end of the day, can any human being force another human being into changing themselves?
Well, we try.
we try to, coerce and to manipulate. I mean, those are negative words, but I said like encourage, right? Encourage and teach and educate.
But ultimately, it does have to come.
Yeah, this is our life journey.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. So is this why, because this eating disorder thing probably runs rampant in some way, shape, or form in all of us? Like, I don't know that many people I can't think of one person who never thinks about their body, losing weight, going to the gym, setting that New Year's resolution to become fit. Like, it seems to be so ingrained in everybody. So is this why you say it's okay to have an eating disorder?
Because and I'll
have one?
Right, absolutely. And I believe the last statistic I read was 75% of all American women endorse some unhealthy thoughts, feelings, and behaviors related to food or their bodies. So it's a great majority. And here is the reason it is okay. Because to me, when we take a few steps back from life and we look at what our overall vision of life is, and each of us will have a different perspective. My perspective is we came from somewhere, we're going somewhere. This is a probationary state. It's our mortal journey of growth and learning how to master this vehicle of the body using the spirit inside. And people don't have to agree with that, but it lends itself to the fact that I believe that in that process, there are going to be all sorts of driving factors. We always hear, what's your why? Why are you doing what you're doing? Well, so then we step back and ask ourselves, well, is this driving me to achieve more or be more in my life? Here's an example. Okay, so let's take someone who is very obsessed with their body and the gym and looking great all the time. Well, instead of judging that and saying you're unhealthy or pushing it too far, what if we were to step back and we were to say, what is this helping you to accomplish in your life? Is this helping you be a better wife and mother? Is this giving you the confidence to go and participate in your community? Is this giving yourself the peace of mind because you're afraid of, if you didn't do that, the negative space you'd be in your head? Are you staying ahead of that voice? If you could answer yes to all those, I'd say fantastic. Good on you, girl. Get after it. Likewise, restricting.
But if you're doing
food.
that to chase or to run away from something else, to fill this void, and then
Right.
it's deciding where in that spectrum we're living. Like, is it because it is super healthy and balanced and filling all your needs, or is it unhealthy, unbalanced, and avoiding all of your needs?
Absolutely.
Like, where on that continuum are we? And it probably moves.
Always. There is no such thing as balance, but seeking for harmony. Harmony is better. Harmony, it's like an orchestra. You're going to have different parts of the instruments pull out at different times, and that's what harmony looks like. They each has their own tune. And so that's often what happens with our eating and our fitness and the way we view our bodies. Of course, there are a few habits that I would encourage anybody out there to consider as not helpful to finding those driving reasons, because they will cloud the clarity as to why we do what we do with our food choices and our fitness choices. And here's, I mean, there's so many thoughts. Keep me from fragmenting myself too much, but in order to even define what those things are, there's education that needs to take place. And my feeling is most people don't even have a baseline education. I have a big beef about this with the way that our public schools are run and why these baseline education points are not being taught. The food pyramid here in America being taught incorrectly. Absolutely. All my dance
same with Canada.
Oh my goodness, it's atrocious. How fitness is being taught is despicable. Well, we're not getting baseline education that forms logic versus irrational thoughts, because we will all have those irrational thoughts. We will all have that comparison game or those moments of weakness or inadequacy where we do think maybe it's my body. And that, depending on how severe that is, that's going to be where we lean on that education or lack thereof to make changes. It is okay to make changes. That's the part I have beef with too, with this whole like body love movement. Yes, love your body, my goodness, but does that mean you can't change it or optimize it? Heck no. Heck no. Yeah. Do what you want. That's my saying to people. Do you, but do it wisely and strategically.
Yeah. And based on what you see you as, like, you know, it's that, I knew a woman and she was very overweight and she goes, oh, I guess I'm happy this way. I'm not losing anything. And I kind of went, oh, is this just your permission to stay unhealthy?
Yeah.
Like, and, you know, we did have quite a few conversations about that. And she did say sometimes she waffles between, is that something I tell myself so that I can be okay with the way I am, or is it something I actually believe? And it was, again, interesting to see that other perspective and on that continuum of okay, not okay for your, like, based on what you want and what you believe. But we're not taught to trust ourselves. We're really not. No, we're taught to trust Hollywood. We're taught to trust our doctors who get how much training in nutrition?
Right. Oh, they have no idea what they're talking about, people. Don't.
We're told to trust, you know, the trainer who tells us that we have to, you know, do 40 minutes of like hardcore cardio when we may not be a cardio person. And so we think that there's all these experts out there. Like, at what point do we actually start taking that perspective that we are the expert on us? And God, if we could teach kids that, holy smokes.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
But it would be tough for the school system because you don't want 30 little children growing around saying, I don't think math is right for me.
Yeah, that would be a disaster. But it comes back to critical thinking. It comes back to, we have to become that master of ourselves, which means in order to make decisions and clear decisions, we have to gather information without bias, without attaching to one piece of information. I think that's a mistake. I see people in researching nutrition and fitness and what's going to make me lose this weight, what's going to decrease my cholesterol, what's going to make me ripped and have a six-pack, what's going to make my butt bigger. Like, unfortunately, we come across one, maybe two pieces of information, and if we're not attuned to how to research academically, then we will be victims of those people and companies who pay search engine optimization to appear on the top ranking of Google, which is probably not ultra credible sources. They're probably biased and manipulated to get you to buy the product or the program. That's how marketing works.
Yet we can't seem to get to that place where we realize it is just an ad, that we somehow think it's the answer as opposed to an advertisement. Right. And that shouldn't be a difficult leap, but it is. And, you know, the algorithms, as soon as you click on one keto diet, you're getting like keto diets in your throat the entire time. Yeah, filtered in with a few Fluvog shoes for me. But it's definitely that thing. And it's like I was talking about at the beginning of the show before bringing you on. It's how, like, when and how we're making a decision. And that we're not coasting through on this autopilot. Like, we're actually, you know, when we're about to prepare a meal, just don't go, oh, what's in my fridge and cook by default. It's actually, what am I going to be doing for the day? How is this going to fuel me? And making those decisions based on how we want our day to look.
Yeah.
Nutritionally.
Yeah. And and that's huge. It's a really big game changer. In fact, just last night I was in the dance studio. I teach dancers like ages 8 to 20. And so of course nutrition comes up a lot, and I try to be more an example than a talker. And so they see the foods I bring in, the snacks I have, they watch my Snapchats, and so they come in and they know now. I've been with this particular studio almost a year, so they're very well trained to know if they have low energy and I ask them what they've eaten, that it is not a glory statement in our studio if they say nothing. I've just had water and a Diet Coke. They sit out. They are not allowed to dance because there is no energy in their bodies. If they want to trim up, I have no problem having that conversation, and I will teach them how to use food to do so.
Right.
But to the point of restriction, labeling bad foods, they have a joke. They're like, we just love the word strategic because Kristy always uses that. They're like, today at lunch, I was sitting there and I told my friends, that's not a strategic food. And I say, oh, time out. How can we define strategic? They're like, oh, not unless you have a goal. It's super cute, but I wish that sort of training could come to every individual, because you can't define good or bad. You can't. You can't define even strategic or non-strategic.
A personal judgment around that.
Exactly.
Like if we say this is good food for me, this is bad food for me, and not have that, but I really want the bad food. Like if we just know, like, this upsets my stomach, it's bad food for me. Like right. If we could, but we can't, because we have so much crap attached to the good bad.
Yeah. Yep. And so getting rid of that, you don't ever get rid of it. You program over it to the point that it crowds out the former beliefs or habits. You know, to this day, because of all the reprogramming work I've done and created this culture of, my body buddies, I call them, that there are foods that even to bring them to my lips is so forced, and I kind of like squint, like it's so awkward. So things like, I don't even use the word fat unless it defines the food, the macronutrient with saturated and unsaturated fats. But in terms of the body, in my culture I've created, we use the words leaner, tighter, fluffier, softer, thicker. So the words, we seek to create a new vernacular, because oftentimes those words and the associations with them, due to societal programming, run so deep that you can't switch it. So you got to create a new one. And that's why, like people ask good or bad foods. I'm like, oh, you're not on the inside yet of my group. When you're asking me, is it strategic or non-strategic? And then you can answer my question of what's your goal? Is it fat loss? Is it managing an autoimmune condition? Is it to restore skin and nail health? Like, what's your goal? Then we can define, is that going to be a strategic food, and in what combination, to then answer your question. And to the person who just wanted an easy answer, they roll their eyes and walk away. And those people were not ready to become masters of themselves, who are critical thinkers.
Yeah.
So, getting ourselves to think and to question and to come to our own analysis of what is okay. It's like you said, giving yourself that permission, which the trust and the confidence to do that comes with time and training. I do not believe it just comes. I feel like if it just comes, then it's arbitrary. For what purpose are we accepting and giving ourselves permission? To just simply be ignorant as to the fact that putting chemicals of food in your body is going to have a consequence? Or are we going to do the work necessary to learn about foods and then maturely and strategically come to a conclusion of an approach and a strategy defined by us? And that is what I love to help people do.
Right. Well, but how do you combat all of that information that's out there? Because, you can read an article that says, apples are great. You read another one that's like, no, apples, there's really a lot of sugar in there. You probably shouldn't have them. Oh, have all these fruits and vegetables. Hang on a second. Fruits and vegetables are not one word. Fruits need to be developed differently than vegetables. For somebody who is busy, because I know personally, the busier I get, the worse my food is. For sure, because I am so consumed with working on something that it's not easy, because it's creating, or it's putting out a fire, or it's doing something like that. And so I try to make other areas of my life easy by not thinking about it. So it's just knee-jerk reaction. Yeah, okay, I'm just going to grab a Starbucks, right? So for me, finding out that information about what's good, what's strategic, and what isn't.
I love it.
Because when I'm listening to you say that too, right? Because I would talk in simple terms like good, bad. Like when I talk colors with my other clients, I talk, because I have this house painting company, and when we're talking colors, I talk in terms of blue, green, orange. Like I don't talk in terms of aqua, salmon, right? So for me, I know I break it down to its simplest, smallest words. So for me, I would talk good, bad, and I'm thinking, strategic. I could see how that would put me in a place where it would force me to stop doing what I'm doing and go, oh, let me think about this for a second.
Right.
As opposed to just reacting. But definitely I move into that place of just what's easy. What am I driving by? Starbucks is my office away from my office. So I'm on the road. I'm going to stop in. I'm just going to grab a coffee. And so it's finding that time to actually become educated, because while I'm trying to get educated on that, I'm trying to get educated on my business. I'm trying to get educated on my finances. I'm trying to get educated on my mortgage. I'm trying, Right. How do we simplify that?
Yeah. Well, I like to tell people it's one of those things that there is a certain amount of focus that comes at the beginning, because the food is deep. But here's the way you have to choose to look at it, right? Is food is the foundation of all energy, focus, and ability. It is the chemicals that break down in your body to create the entire foundation that you run your business on, make decisions from, operate emotionally from, and potential sickness, illness, which takes you away from every aspect of life. So it's a shift of thought to say it's worth it to take the time to either listen to my audiobook. That's a great, baseline. Okay, I have that information, so I can start. I know enough to start making those steps, baby steps.
Right. And how do people find that book?
It's on audible.com, Power Fizz Lifestyle.
Excellent.
But I think I have rarely seen people succeed in changing their habits with dabbling. And so, and this is the case for, I like you, I love to absorb and learn and work on the business and work on the finances and work on the relationships and work on everything. But thankfully, I've had some great coaches for myself as well that have taught me about this tipping of the plate, and I call them seasons. You have to have a season. In my life, I define a season as 8 to 12 weeks. For 8 to 12 weeks, I'm going to tip the balance this way. I'm going to tip it this way, so that I can focus, and instead of dabbling in everything, I can actually know enough and immerse myself enough in something that it can become ritualistic and habitual to the point where I can keep those automatic behaviors going while I focus on the next season. And I have found in my life that strategy has led me to accelerate faster in growth and personal development in every area, rather than trying to do it all at once, getting overwhelmed, getting anxious, feeling like a screw up, and then saying, screw it all, I hate trying to be better. I'm just going to just live. And that's what happens to us.
I want it easy again.
So that would be my advice is seasons, 4, 8, or 12 weeks, and tip the balance in one direction. And hopefully you can create a hierarchy where it's, okay, what will be most beneficial to me in the long term being even 1 year. In 1 year, if I can get my food dialed in a little bit more, not perfect, there's no such thing, but dialed in a little bit more where my energy is more consistent, my moods are more consistent, and I'm feeling like I'm getting sick less. My bathroom behavior, yes, I'm going to talk about that briefly, is consistent, because that's our number one indicator. If there's not regularity there, if it's not consistent and predictable, you've got some big time issues to work through. And that is absolutely worth fixing, because 80% of your immune system lies outside of that digestive tract. You want to get sick, you want to miss days at work, you want to not have the time to put into your business or your family or your work life, you want to pay those hospital bills, keep eating what you're eating. Right. And so that would be more the mindset of, okay, we can tip the balance of a little bit of education. But going back to what you mentioned about so much many resources out there. And about the apples, that was a great example. Well, one person says this, one person says this. And what I teach my people is this simple thinking habit. You ask yourself the question, is this source that I'm reading, is this author or blogger or whoever it be, are they specifically citing the demographic they are speaking to? If they are not good enough of a source for me to listen to, because a smart, wise, credible source will be able to specifically identify the audience who their information is targeted to.
Right.
And that's as it is.
So then how do you start learning if there's certain habits that are going to work better for you than other ones? Like, should you be on high fat? Should you be on carb cycling? There's all of this stuff out there, and that seems to be the easiest information to access.
Right.
Do you start with one of those, see if it works and move on? Like, how do you filter through all that?
Yeah. Well, in one of my 8-week challenges, I use a strategy that helps people figure that out by the end of 8 weeks. So I start them on moderate carbs. Protein is always pretty consistent unless we go into ketosis. And that, of course, needs to drop the protein a bit more than normal. So then we start to shift down. The calories will always stay approximately the same. And, of course, people can find a little bit more of their deficit needed. I try not to cut anymore from 300 to 500 calories from maintenance from the food. The rest should come from exercise, and no more than a total deficit of 1,200 calories per day with food and exercise combined. So week by week, we drop their carbs and compensate with fats. And their goal throughout the process is to note and to journal and to record how their body feels. The more we drop carbs and compensate with fats, what 90% of my people who go through this process experience is their body does really well on protein, veggie, fat. Our vernacular is PVF meals as a baseline. And then whether they choose a strategy, I have about 8 different strategies. So like things like a floating carb would mean you could do anywhere from 20 to 30 grams of carbs anytime in the day, as long as you're hitting your PVF meal baseline. Or perhaps it's more of a carb cycle where, every 3, 4, or 5 days you have a higher carb day, which is regulated. Even within a carb cycle day, I have a refeed strategy versus a moderated carb intake per meal. And so it's more about learning and finding somebody like myself, and there's other great people out there who can articulate these things. But what I have found, unfortunately, is most people and trainers and nutritionists out there, they're really attached to the one way because of that's how marketing works. And I'm doing what many people and coaches have said is the unthinkable and the impossible, which is I'm trying to create an empire that offers all of those eating styles and helps people figure out the right one for them. Wow. And I think that process really only comes through teaching people how to think. And so going back to your question, how does a person find it? I would say avoid extremes. If you go from eating carbs every day and you're like, I'm going to do this keto thing. Do I think ketosis is fantastic? Sure. For a select population of people. Do I think there's a lot of big challenges that come with it? Yeah. And I hate to see how trendy it is right now because the wrong people are jumping on it. Right. And if we're not programmed, I'd rather see people do a low carb, like a PVF style with a floating carb here or there until they're really confident that they can stick with it. Because the worst thing we could do is an extreme eating style and then damage metabolism, leptin and ghrelin, all of our hormones in that process of not being sustainable. And so
I think that, sorry, not to interrupt here, but I think what is so standing out for me is that ability to meet people where they're at.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Right? Because, I've talked to so many people in this industry because a lot of people want to be on this show talking about that. And I don't bring a lot of them on because I think that they are just so married to their own way.
Yeah.
And I love that. And that's fine. And that works for them and it works for their clients, but it doesn't actually start addressing that whole individual perspective, individual needs, individual space, whatever it is that's going on. It doesn't address any of that. So I love that you are able to just turn food into finding out what works for you.
Oh, thank you. It's,
Mhm.
it's a huge undertaking to,
Yeah.
it's certainly not, if you were just going into the business to make money, it's certainly not the best approach. So, I do it because of my experience of what I've been through and knowing the pain of feeling like nobody is showing up for you to teach you. That was like what I resented is, why didn't someone show up for me when I needed someone? And that's why I do what I do. I will show up for somebody. Right. I will be there as that educator and guide. And I mean, when you're dealing in the trenches of this darkness and feeling completely inadequate, or you would just literally, and people tell themselves this, I would die to have that dream body, or I would die to have this under control, we find that our behavior starts to manifest that. We have to very, very much guard our words. We have to be very mindful of those thoughts and words we attach to, because they do become our reality.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I've really enjoyed. I had no idea where this show was going to kind of go. And we've spoken before this show, and
I loved having you on my show. Thank you again. I've gotten so much amazing feedback, and people like mind blow. They're like, "Whoa, I need a minute after listening to that."
And it's super cool. I'm glad we were able to provide that to your listeners. And I love how you're so open. And I find that more and more with the people that I'm meeting that think opposite, that think about the decisions that they're making, the impact that they're having. Because, thinking about your decisions more about choosing A over B. But it's that impact. And it's aligned with what you're thinking, like that's the strategy that goes into it. And I think you're absolutely fantastic. And how do people find you?
Oh, thank
so
you.
They can explore more of your fantastic.
Well, I think the best place probably is on Facebook. That'd be the best place to go. Body Buddies, just search for that, 2 different words. Or my website, my main website is body-buddies.com.
I love it. So any sort of parting remarks in the last couple of minutes that we have here?
Well, I think one of the best word changes we could make in our life is to get rid of the word changes. Because change is scary and it's intimidating, and we create this fear and this murky, I don't know, just
and it implies that we're doing something really wrong.
Right.
Yeah,
and so
we're not good enough. We have to change.
And instead of using the word change, if we seek to say, hey, I am great, but I always have room to optimize. And that word optimization has been a game changer for so many people, because it allows you, stepping back again, looking at life, it allows you room to grow. It allows you room to make mistakes. It allows you room to drop judgment, but it doesn't allow for you to victimize, blame, shame, or have guilt, because that's not going to serve us. So instead we say, great, this happened. How can I optimize? And that makes us into a self-starter, and we will find solutions 10 times out of 10.
Fantastic. I love it. And I love the changes, the optimization that you are allowing people to realize in their lives. It's truly a gift you're providing. Thank you so much. And thank you for being a guest on the show.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review on iTunes. You can learn more about Body Buddies and Power Foods Lifestyle by going to www.body-buddies.com, BODY-BUDDIES.com, and powerfoodslifestyle.com. That's www.POWERFOODS-lifestyle.com.
Information in this episode is provided for informational purposes and is not meant to substitute the advice provided by your own physician or other medical professional. Information and statements regarding dietary supplements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.